Silence in marriage is louder than arguments. When was the last time you and your husband truly talked? Not about bills, not about grandchildren, not about schedules, but about your hearts. Why does the house feel quieter even when he is sitting right next to you? Why does peace sometimes feel like distance? After 30 years, there are no more dramatic fights, no more slammed doors, no more loud confrontations, just silence. And sometimes silence feels heavier than conflict ever did. You built a life together. You survived financial pressure. You raised children. You endured seasons of stress, sacrifice, responsibility. So why does it feel different now? Why does love feel calmer, but colder? Why does connection feel routine instead of alive? Here is a question no one asks out loud. What if this quiet season is not the end of intimacy, but the exposure of it? Jesus performed his first miracle at a wedding, not at a funeral, not in a temple, at a wedding, because marriage matters deeply to God. But what happens when the wine runs out decades later? You did not click on this video by accident. If your marriage feels quiet after 30 years, this is not coincidence. This may be your spiritual awakening inside your relationship. Love in later years is built, not felt. And if you misunderstand this season, you may slowly drift into emotional isolation without realizing it. Stay with me. What we are about to uncover may not only change your marriage, it may change how you see love, partnership, and God's purpose in this stage of life. Topic 1. When emotional distance grows quietly. Silence in marriage does not arrive suddenly. It grows slowly, almost invisibly, like a shadow stretching at the end of the day. After 30 years together, you know each other's habits. You know the way he sighs when he is tired. You know how he folds the newspaper, how he sits in his chair, how he answers simple questions. There is familiarity everywhere, and familiarity can feel safe. But sometimes, familiarity replaces curiosity. You stop asking deeper questions. You stop sharing unfinished thoughts. You stop revealing new fears or new dreams. Not because you stopped loving each other, but because routine took the place of intentional connection. And here is the truth many women over 55 quietly carry. Emotional distance hurts more when there is no obvious conflict to blame. You cannot point to a betrayal. You cannot point to a dramatic argument. You cannot explain why something feels missing. It is simply quiet. Proverbs 4:23 says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." After decades of marriage, guarding your heart does not mean protecting it from your spouse. It means protecting it from emotional withdrawal. Emotional distance often begins when both partners assume the other already knows everything about them. But you are not the same woman you were at 30. You have changed. You have grown. You have endured. You have awakened in ways he may not fully see. And perhaps he has changed too. Ecclesiastes 4:9-10 reminds us that two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. If one falls, the other can lift them up. Marriage was never designed to become two parallel lives under one roof. It was designed to be partnership, but partnership requires presence. After raising children, managing responsibilities, navigating careers and crises, many couples unconsciously shift from connection to coexistence. The home becomes peaceful, but the hearts become distant. This is where silent pain begins. You sit across from him at dinner. You watch television side by side. You share updates about the day. Yet something feels unspoken. And the danger is not loud separation. The danger is slow drifting. Revelation 2:4 speaks about losing first love. That verse was written to a church, but it applies to relationships too. Love does not disappear dramatically. It fades when intentionality fades. This is not a message of accusation. It is an invitation to awareness. God is not exposing your marriage to shame you. He may be awakening you to rebuild it, because here is something powerful. Emotional distance is not proof that love is gone. It is proof that love needs attention. And attention requires courage. In the next topic, we must ask a deeper question. If routine replaced connection, how do we tell the difference between peaceful stability and emotional stagnation? That is where we are going next. Topic 2. When routine replaces connection. In the first topic, we uncovered something subtle but powerful. Emotional distance does not always arrive through conflict. It often arrives through routine. Routine is not evil. In fact, routine can feel like safety. After 30 years of marriage, stability feels earned. You survived storms. You built a home. You created shared history. There is comfort in predictability. But routine can quietly replace connection if you are not attentive. You wake up. You move through the day. Meals are prepared. Conversations revolve around logistics. Evenings pass with television or silence. There is no hostility, no visible breakdown, just rhythm. And here is the question that may feel uncomfortable. When did rhythm replace romance? When did predictability replace curiosity? Genesis 2:24 says that a man and woman become one flesh. That oneness was never meant to be mechanical. It was meant to be relational, dynamic, alive. Yet after decades, it is easy to shift into functional partnership. You become excellent teammates. You manage life well. You divide responsibilities smoothly. But spiritual and emotional intimacy slowly becomes secondary. This is not failure. It is drift. Drift happens when effort decreases because familiarity increases. You assume you know him fully. He assumes he knows you completely. But people are not static. God continues shaping us across decades. New fears arise, new longings emerge, new questions surface in later life. If those inner changes are not shared, connection weakens. Song of Solomon speaks poetically about love being awakened and pursued. Many people think romance belongs only to youth, but the Bible never limits passion to a certain age. Love matures, but it must still be nurtured. After children leave and responsibilities lessen, couples often discover they must relearn each other. The distraction of busyness is gone. What remains is the quality of the bond itself. Some women quietly ask, "Is this all there is now?" That question does not mean you want to leave. It means you want depth. Psalm 127:1 says, "Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain." You built a house together physically, but are you allowing God to rebuild emotional intimacy spiritually? Routine without intention leads to emotional neutrality, and neutrality is more dangerous than conflict. Conflict at least signals engagement. Neutrality signals withdrawal. If you feel this shift, do not panic. Awareness is the first step toward renewal. God specializes in restoration. Joel 2:25 speaks of restoring the years the locusts have eaten. If years of busyness consumed emotional intimacy, God can restore depth in later seasons. But restoration requires participation. It requires asking new questions. It requires vulnerability again. It requires choosing presence instead of passive coexistence. You are not too old for renewal. You are not too established for intimacy. You are not beyond rediscovery. But here is the deeper layer we must face next. If routine created distance, how do you intentionally rebuild intimacy without forcing artificial emotion? That is what we will explore in the next topic. Topic 3. Rebuilding intentional intimacy. If routine slowly replaced connection, then intimacy must now be rebuilt intentionally. And here is something important to understand. Intimacy in later years does not begin with emotion. It begins with intention. Many women over 55 quietly wait to feel something again before they act differently. They wait for romance to return naturally. They wait for conversation to flow effortlessly. They wait for him to notice first. But love in later years is built, not felt. Feelings follow investment, not the other way around. Revelation 2:5 gives a profound instruction. Remember the height from which you have fallen. Repent and do the things you did at first. Notice that Jesus did not say, wait until you feel it again. He said, return to the practices. If you once asked him about his dreams, ask again. If you once prayed together, begin again. If you once walked and talked, start again. Intimacy grows where attention goes. After decades, vulnerability feels riskier because expectations feel fragile. You may think, what if he does not respond? Or what if nothing changes? But avoiding vulnerability guarantees stagnation. Ephesians 4:2 speaks about being completely humble and gentle, bearing with one another in love. Intimacy is not dramatic, it is gentle, it is patient, it is consistent. Begin with small intentional acts. Ask deeper questions, not logistical ones. Share something personal from your own heart first. Express appreciation without waiting for perfection. Invite conversation instead of assuming silence. Do not underestimate the spiritual power of shared prayer. When two people kneel together before God, pride softens, walls weaken, hearts align. Matthew 18:20 says, where 2 or 3 gather in my name, there am I with them. Jesus is present not only in church services, but in living rooms, in quiet kitchens, in evening prayers whispered before sleep. If your marriage feels quiet, perhaps it is waiting for spiritual leadership through humility. Instead of saying, he has changed, ask, how can I model openness? Instead of saying, he never initiates, ask, can I begin gently? Love at this stage is not about recreating youthful excitement. It is about cultivating mature closeness. Song of Solomon describes love as strong as death. That strength does not come from butterflies. It comes from covenant. Covenant love chooses presence repeatedly. You may feel emotionally distant now, but distance is not destiny. It is a signal. God did not bring you through 3 decades together to let your bond fade into quiet coexistence. He is a God of renewal. Lamentations 3:22-23 reminds us that his mercies are new every morning. If his mercy renews daily, your marriage can too. But renewal requires participation. Intentional intimacy means scheduling connection instead of assuming it. It means speaking gratitude instead of storing resentment. It means touching gently, listening attentively, and choosing eye contact over distraction. And here is the deeper truth. Rebuilding intimacy often awakens parts of yourself that you neglected. As you reconnect with him, you rediscover your own emotional depth. But this raises another essential question. If you begin rebuilding connection, how do you avoid using prayer as an escape from difficult conversations? That is what we must face next. Topic 4. Prayer as partnership, not escape. When emotional distance grows and routine replaces connection, many spiritually sensitive women do something sincere but incomplete. They pray alone. Prayer is powerful. Prayer is sacred. Prayer is necessary. But prayer was never meant to replace communication inside marriage. It was meant to strengthen it. There is a subtle temptation after 30 years together. Instead of speaking honestly to your husband, you speak only to God about him. You tell God your disappointments. You tell God your loneliness. You ask God to change him. And while God hears you with compassion, something important may be missing. Marriage was designed as partnership. Genesis 2:18 says, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." That word helper in Hebrew carries strength, not weakness. It implies alignment, support, cooperation. Prayer should draw you closer to your spouse, not create spiritual distance from them. If prayer becomes an emotional refuge that replaces conversation, intimacy cannot grow. James 5:16 says, "Confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed." Notice the order. Speak to each other. Pray for each other. Prayer is partnership when it softens your heart before difficult conversations. It becomes escape when it replaces them. It is easier to say, "I'll pray about it," than to say, "Can we talk?" It is easier to ask God to fix what feels uncomfortable than to risk vulnerability face to face. But God does not want you spiritually strong and relationally silent. He wants unity. Ecclesiastes 4:12 reminds us that a cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. Husband, wife, and God. Not wife and God alone. Not husband and routine alone. 3 strands intertwined. If your marriage feels quiet after 30 years, perhaps God is inviting you into shared spiritual intimacy. Pray together again. It may feel awkward at first. It may feel unfamiliar, but awkwardness is often the doorway to renewal. Start small. Hold hands. Thank God for one thing about your spouse out loud. Ask for guidance for both of you. When you pray together, walls lower because humility enters the room. 1 Peter 4:8 says, "Above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins." Deep love requires shared spiritual posture. Do not use prayer to avoid hard conversations. Use prayer to prepare for them. When you pray first, pride weakens, defensiveness softens, tone changes, and something powerful happens. You stop seeing your husband as the problem and begin seeing him as a partner navigating the same aging, the same changes, the same uncertainties. After 30 years, both of you carry silent fears about health, about aging, about relevance, about purpose. Sometimes silence in marriage is not lack of love. It is unspoken vulnerability. Prayer as partnership creates safety for those vulnerabilities to surface. But this leads us to the final realization. If love must be rebuilt intentionally, and prayer must be shared rather than isolated, what does mature love truly look like in later years? That is where we are going next. Topic 5. Love in later years is built, not felt. We have walked through emotional distance, routine replacing connection, intentional intimacy, and prayer as partnership. Now we arrive at the truth that may reshape everything. Love in later years is built, not felt. In your 20s, love felt spontaneous. In your 30s, it felt passionate and urgent. In your 40s, it was sustained by responsibility. In your 50s and beyond, love becomes something different. It becomes deliberate. Feelings fluctuate. Seasons shift. Bodies change. Energy changes, but covenant remains. 1 Corinthians 13 does not describe love as excitement. It describes it as patience, kindness, perseverance. It says love always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Always is not emotional, always is intentional. After 30 years, love is no longer about discovery. It is about decision. You decide to listen even when silence feels easier. You decide to reach for his hand even when routine feels comfortable. You decide to speak gently when indifference would be simpler. That is strength. The world glorifies youthful passion. God glorifies faithful endurance. Malachi 2:14 calls marriage a covenant before God. Covenant means commitment beyond mood, beyond excitement, beyond temporary distance. And here is something powerful. Love that is built intentionally in later years becomes deeper than early romance ever was. Because now it is informed by shared history. You have walked through loss together, through financial strain, through parenting challenges, through health scares, through disappointments. Every season shaped you. But if you allow quiet distance to define this stage, you risk wasting the maturity you have earned. Song of Solomon 8:7 says, "Many waters cannot quench love, rivers cannot sweep it away." Those waters are the years, the responsibilities, the fatigue, the misunderstandings. Love survives when it is tended. At this stage of life, you are not trying to impress each other. You are trying to preserve each other. Love becomes protection. It becomes companionship. It becomes spiritual partnership. It becomes sitting together in peace and choosing presence instead of drifting into separate worlds. And here is the deeper spiritual awakening inside this season. God may be using this quiet phase to refine both of you individually so you can reconnect more authentically. Silence can reveal what noise once hid. It can show you where you withdrew, where you stopped expressing gratitude, where you stopped sharing dreams. But exposure is not condemnation, it is invitation. If your marriage feels quiet after 30 years, it does not mean love is gone. It may mean love is waiting to be rebuilt intentionally. Start with small consistency. One meaningful conversation per week, one shared prayer per day, one expression of appreciation spoken clearly. Small actions compound. Remember Ecclesiastes 3. There is a time for everything. Perhaps this is not the season of loud romance. Perhaps it is the season of steady companionship, and steady companionship is holy. If this message spoke to you, stay connected to Soul Awakening. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you can continue this journey of spiritual renewal and relational depth. Share this with a woman who may be carrying silent distance in her marriage. Comment the word intentional if you are choosing to build love rather than wait for feelings. Remember this: silence in marriage does not mean the end. It may mean the beginning of conscious love. Love in later years is built, not felt. And with God at the center, what feels quiet can become sacred again.